Hello, hello, and thanks for stopping by. This is Pac-Man for the Atari 2600, and it was published by Atari in 1981. This was one of those games that was published in different versions. I have two. One was published by Atari, and the other was published by Sears Telegames. I'll digress for just a minute. That's Telegames with a hyphen in the middle. There's another Telegames with no hyphen, and it's a different company that still exists today. It's kind of strange to have two companies only differentiated by a hyphen, but it is what it is. Anyway, Sears was a dominant department store back then, and they were big enough to have their own brand of the Atari 2600 console and individual carts that they published under a different name. There were more than 50 of them. Same game, different sticker on the label. I'm playing from a cartridge plugged into a Retron 77, and this version of Pac-Man for the 2600 is considered one of the worst translations of the game. It's certainly functional as a Pac-Man game, it's just that the delivery is not what you would expect for such an iconic game. The original game looked a very specific way, and this deviates from the visual model far enough where you can't help but notice. In the arcade, Pac-Man is running around eating pellets and dodging ghosts. Here, you're dodging ghosts and eating little rectangle wafers. Pellets versus wafers. Wafers just look strange. The colors are drastically different too. In the arcade, you're racing around in a stark black background, while here we have a baby blue backdrop and a gold maze. Maybe there's a good reason for the difference, I don't know, but when I see blue and gold, I think I'm looking at the colors of the Boy Scouts. Maybe that's a little specific, but that's what I see. I really didn't think black would be that hard to program, and there were only a handful of colors in the arcade version in total, so that was kinda strange. If there was one thing that this game would have benefited from, it would be a different color scheme. Seriously, it would have been a night and day difference. So here instead, we have a Pac-Man that isn't quite round, running around eating wafers, accompanied by an odd, almost honking sound when you eat one. In the arcade, they had an iconic waka waka sound as you made your trek through the maze eating stuff. I guess the sound wasn't easy to recreate on the system, so we ended up with honks. Every now and then a bonus icon appears in the arcade, and it's a piece of fruit, and you eat it for bonus points. Here, we're offered a yellow square in a slightly darker yellow square. Honestly, it looks like a square waffle with a pat of butter on top. So now we got Pac-Man eating wafers and waffles, trying to not get eaten by ghosts. There are also 4 power pills at the corners of the maze, and when you eat them, they let you kill ghosts for a few seconds. Standard Pac-Man stuff, I guess. The power pills here, they're just blinking power squares. Nothing too crazy, just not round like in the arcade. The difficulty programming around objects for the Atari 2600 seems to have had an effect on the game. Also, compared to the arcade, the map is different. I know there are limitations and all that with the system, but the teleport tunnel in the arcade is on the east and west side of the map. In this version, it's on the north and south. Just another deviation to make it stand out as being different. Like I mentioned earlier, it is Pac-Man, and it functions mostly like you'd expect. If you like Pac-Man and the monotony of only one maze, you'll probably be okay with this one. It's definitely a Pac-Man game. There are a few variations of the game on the cart, and that is kind of nice. I mean, there are a total of 8 different games that you can select, and each one can be played 1 or 2 players. Basically, the differences in the games are just different combinations of speed for either Pac-Man or the Ghosts. Pac-Man has 2 speeds you can select, slow and fast, and the Ghosts have 4 different speeds, so you can make things really easy on yourself or really hard. The one thing that I do like about this game, and it's kind of small and specific, it's when you eat a ghost. I know that there were limitations on sound capabilities for this 2600, but here, when you scarf down a ghost, there is this clicking pop noise that is oddly satisfying. I can't explain it past that, it's just satisfying. I think it's also one of the more common games for the system. Pac-Man was kind of synonymous with the arcade scene in the early 80s, and this game showed up everywhere. This also replaced Combat eventually as the Pac-In game with the Atari 2600 console, so I'm sure they moved a lot of units that way. Well, I think that's all I got on Pac-Man, so I'm gonna wrap it up. Thanks for stopping by.